If you think people will always treat you with respect just because you're paying for a seat, think again. This is the story of a man who walked onto a first-class flight in a suit that didn't match the expected style, got laughed at by the cabin crew, and minutes later made a single phone call that changed everything. If you want more stories that make you rethink the way the world works, don't forget to subscribe, because what you're about to hear will leave your jaw on the floor. Laugh. It was a bright Monday morning at Heathrow Airport. Business travelers shuffled toward gate A17, their rolling suitcases clicking against the polished floor. Among them was Darnell Brooks, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a mustard-yellow three-piece suit paired with brown leather loafers and a wide-brimmed hat. It wasn't the sleek navy or charcoal you'd expect from first-class passengers. Darnell walked with confidence, a leather satchel over his shoulder, but the stares came instantly. As he handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, two flight attendants standing nearby exchanged glances and stifled laughs. One leaned over to the other and whispered, "Looks like someone's going to a costume party." Darnell caught it, but his expression stayed calm. He stepped into the jet bridge, the hum of the engines vibrating under his feet. When he reached the first-class cabin, a young attendant with a perfectly pinned name badge greeted him, her smile thin and polite. She looked him up and down before saying, "Sir, I think you might be in the wrong section." Darnell simply replied, "Seat 1A," and handed over his ticket. She blinked, forced a smile, and directed him to his seat. As he settled in, he overheard two crew members joking quietly about old-fashioned fashion statements and wannabe big shots. He kept his hands folded and stared out the window, letting their words hang in the air. The flight was boarding slowly. First class. Passengers were offered champagne. When the tray came to Darnell, the attendant hesitated, then turned to offer the drink to the man in 1B first, skipping over Darnell entirely. He cleared his throat gently. "May I have one as well?" She gave a short nod and handed him a glass, without meeting his eyes. Moments later, she returned to offer menus but seemed to rush past his seat again, barely explaining the options. The pattern was clear. Small, subtle slights meant to remind him he didn't fit their image of a first-class traveler. Across the aisle, a businessman in a tailored suit gave Darnell an apologetic look, clearly noticing the treatment. "Don't mind them," the man whispered. "Some people can't see past appearances." Darnell gave a small smile. "I've dealt with worse." Then, as if to test the limits, one attendant came by and said, "Sir, the dress code in first. Class is typically more formal. Just so you know for next time." The businessman's jaw dropped. Darnell calmly said, "Thank you for your input," and turned back to his phone. But behind his calm, something was brewing. Not anger, but a plan. The call. About 30 minutes into the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin lightly. Darnell reached into his satchel and pulled out a sleek black phone. He scrolled for a moment, then tapped a contact labeled simply Mark. The call connected instantly. "Mark, it's Darnell," he said casually. "Yeah, I'm on your airline right now. Thought you should know. Your first-class crew has an interesting take on customer service." There was a pause, and then Darnell chuckled. "No, I'm not upset. Just surprised. I figured you'd want to know how they treat passengers who don't dress like everyone else." Across the aisle, the businessman's eyes widened. Mark wasn't just anyone. This was Mark Ellison, CEO of the very airline they were flying on. Darnell spoke in the same calm, friendly tone you'd use with an old friend. "Yeah, I'll still be at the meeting in New York. See you at the club later." He hung up and slid the phone back into his satchel. A ripple of tension seemed to spread through the cabin as the lead flight attendant approached, suddenly flustered. "Mr. Brooks, is everything all right?" she asked. Darnell smiled warmly. "It will be." The reckoning, 15 minutes. Later, the captain himself stepped into the cabin, something that rarely happened mid-flight. He approached Darnell's seat, extended a hand, and said, "Mr. Brooks, Mark sends his regards. He asked me to make sure you have everything you need." The entire first-class cabin watched in stunned silence. The captain signaled to the attendants, and suddenly they were offering Darnell personalized service, his champagne refilled, his meal upgraded to a chef's special prepared on board. But Darnell wasn't petty. When the attendant who had mocked him earlier returned with an apology, he accepted it with grace. "Everyone has bad days," he said. "But remember, you never know who you're speaking to. Respect should come before judgment." By the time the flight landed in New York, the crew was almost falling over themselves to make amends. As Darnell stepped off the plane, the businessman from 1B clapped him on the shoulder. "I think you just taught them a lesson they'll never forget." Darnell smiled, adjusted his mustard-yellow suit, and said, "That was the point." He walked into the terminal, his head high, leaving behind a cabin crew who would think twice before laughing at someone based on appearance again.